everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share two that we love and think you should read when, Brad.
Right now, people, I got to be careful, Jen. I'm in a rocking chair and I got to just make sure I don't fall out or my computer doesn't flip. But read these right now. I'm going to try to
We don't
holster my
want
emotions a little
any,
bit.
that's right, we don't want any enthusiasm related
Uh,
disasters, right?
yeah, I think I'm giddy because I'm going to do something that I rarely do on the show. I've maybe only done it a couple times before. So you know that when I do it, it's got to be a good book because I'm breaking
I
all kinds
cannot
of
wait.
internal Brad rules.
Oh, I cannot wait. I love Rebel Brad, the best of all the Brads. Rebel Brad, rule breaking Brad is my favorite because he comes out very rarely. It's a
Right.
very rarely that Brad's breaking rules. Well, lay it on me. What book are you sharing with me this week, friend?
Okay, first I think I'll share the rule that, and it's not a rule, but it's like a guidepost. I try
Sure.
to maybe share books that are new. And when I say new, I mean, I'm not talking about book two, book three, book four in this series. Like people get the point after I share the first one. But today, people, I am going to share a sequel because it is so good. And even if it steers people back to the first book or it reminds them of that, or maybe they didn't know there was a sequel, either way, I'm doing it. I'm breaking the rule. I got a sequel. And if you remember, Jen, and you probably do because you remember lots of things, the original book that I'm going to get to was one of my probably top three, which mentally for me, that's the top echelon. A lot of times I'll say top five, but it's like one of my all-time favorite books. And that's actually why I have to share the sequel because there's
I think
nothing
I know
like,
what it is. I
there's
think I know what it
nothing
is.
like it. It feels just good to look at these books. It feels good to read them. So the book I'm going to share is
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second and say that I had just recently recorded and have been working on editing an episode of The Reader's Heart with Dan Gemeinhart. And he was very careful to say to me that Coyote Lost and Found is not a sequel, it's a companion.
Thank
So
you.
you could read one without having read the other.
I
So there
love
you
it.
go.
And that makes me want to make a request for Dan. So, Dan, if you're listening, I am requesting that you write another companion to go with this book and the other book, because I am interested in hearing about Coyote and her life with her mom when that was a thing. Okay, Dan? Because
Okay,
he
get
gave
on
in to the
it, Dan.
people. He says at one point in this book, or maybe I read it online somewhere, that so many people had asked for this companion that he finally did it. So, Dan, would it be too greedy of us to say you got one more companion in you? Do you?
That's it.
So,
Do it, Dan. Get on it, Dan.
all
You have
right.
been charged right now.
Exactly. So reasons why I think you would love this book and that you, I guess, don't even have to read the prequel or what the companion, although you should. Coyote Lost and Found is a book. So Coyote, these are just the meaning I make from the book. She and her dad are such eclectic, nostalgic, eccentric characters that you love reading about, and you could picture, at least I do, in a school. If Coyote went to the school where I got to work, I think I would want to be her best friend, and I would want and think other kids should. But there's also a chance that other kids, or maybe even me, wouldn't notice that value or receive or experience, like they just wouldn't know what they're missing out on. They might place some judgments, just because she has some idiosyncrasies. But nevertheless, that's one reason I fell in love with the book and its other companion. Like there's a page I think I tweeted out and maybe even tagged Dan in it as I was reading. I was literally laughing out loud, just thinking. It was towards the beginning when Coyote was in the library, and she was interacting with, I'm going to use the word in air quotes, a friend, an acquaintance from school, who had Coyote had given the nickname Ostrich. And it was just so perfectly, authentically awkward, not forced at all. You could just picture it naturally happening and why it's happening, but yet it was a master class on bringing the reader into a specific moment in time with two really unique characters and just feeling like, you're just really lucky to be sitting with them and the insights. But anyway, I better tighten this up a little bit, otherwise I could go on all day. So long story short, and I'm not going to get towards the end of the book because I just want to focus on the beginning for obvious reasons, I hope. But Coyote discovers something in Jaeger, and Jaeger, if I'm saying it right, is the name of the bus that her and her dad had a previous adventure in a companion book, right? And but she discovered something behind the bookshelf and came to realize it was her mom or her mom's ashes. And then she, eventually confronted her dad and just, had some feelings about that. And then he and his former wife, or however you word that, like before Coyote was born, they had committed to, if one of them passed or something would happen, they both wrote in a book where they would want to be remembered and buried or sprinkled. And Coyote lost she didn't know that book mattered, but she lost the book that her mom's last wishes were written in, and hence the adventure and kind of the title Lost and Found. Although I think a case could be made that Lost and Found is referring to a lot of different things than just a book. So at the risk of going over our allotted Zoom time, Jen, I'm just going to say from the bottom of my heart, this is a companion to one of my favorite books of all time, and it's not often where a legitimate case could be made that a sequel or a companion book is as good as, if not better than the first. And I never thought in a million years I would ever utter these words after reading the first one, but it reminds me a little bit of, like, and people could disagree or argue with this, The Hate You Give. I loved, powerful. When I read On the Come Up,
Yeah.
loved, like, how did lightning strike twice, in the way that Angie Thomas, kind of in the same universe, um did that. It reminds me of, in just a different way, like, how did Dan catch lightning in a bottle twice and then even make it different but more meaningful and keep those connections. So that's it. I'm giving myself the cane or whatever they call it. I think you should read right now Coyote Lost and Found, and I have on good authority that if you miss the first one, you don't even have to go back and read that one. You could actually start right here with this companion book.
But I predict that if you haven't read Coyote Sunrise and you start with Coyote Lost and Found, you're going to want to go back and read Coyote Sunrise. I predict you'll want to read both of them
For
if you
sure.
haven't.
And I also predict your heart would be full just literally just reading this one. It is so ridiculously good and tricky and authentic. And I think that's one thing I've noticed over time. Some of my favorite authors and new favorite authors, they just do such a great job of having authentic
Yeah.
human beings with lots of different things going on, and it doesn't feel forced. But this definitely fits into that rare category where I would like, this is awkward, Jen. I would like to hang out with Coyote and her dad, but I might, maybe I don't know if I could handle, I don't know if I could handle it. Isn't that kind of cool and authentic? Like, that's the
Yeah.
level of realness that they have. So
I love that. I was going to approach my book talk today in a totally different way, but as you were chatting about Coyote and her family and the cast of characters that always surround them, I was thinking about how, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who does this, but you'll have to tell me if you do. Sometimes when I'm reading books, because I read so many books for kids, and I know you do too, sometimes I'm thinking about characters, and not only do they feel like real people in, my head, in my brain, or in my heart, but also I think about how a character from one book might be friends with a character from another book, right? Like I'm constantly matchmaking in terms of friendships with characters in books for kids. And so I hadn't thought about it before, but as you were talking, I kept thinking about how Coyote, I think, would be like best friends with the main character from the book that I want to chat a little bit about today, which is Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All. Have you seen this book yet, Brad?
no, I have not.
Oh, I'm in love with this book for so many different reasons. I just want to show the quick cover. I also want to point out just how it's a little skinny thing, which I think a lot of kids, there's lots of reasons why kids love big, long books to read, but there's also some kids for whom a 350 or more book feels like a mountain that they can't climb. So I love when, publishers publish these or share these middle grade books that are a little bit shorter. So this book, first of all, let me talk a little bit about Magnolia, who is the main character, and maybe why you can see why I think she and Coyote would be BFFs. Magnolia has a very different life from Coyote, but she's the kind of kid who's kind of always in her head. She's always thinking about the world, about how people perceive her. She's very sensitive. She is the kind of kid, she's introverted in the way that it takes her a little while to figure out her place amongst other people. Her life is different from Coyote. She lives in New York City with her parents who immigrated to the United States from China. They own their own laundromat. And like a lot of kids, I think, whose parents are first generation Americans, is that she feels like her parents only care about the laundromat. That's all they care about because they're so devoted to work. And of course, creating a better life for Magnolia, right? But the reality is, of course, that what they care most about is Magnolia, and their devotion to the laundromat is all about that love and that care. But that leaves Magnolia sitting in the laundromat, often like creating games in her mind and being watching the world outside from inside the laundromat, reading those kinds of things. And one of the things that she does, and this was really endearing to me right off the bat, is that she collects all of the lost socks that are left in the laundromat and puts them up on the board. So, like, I mean, Brad, we've all had the experience of having a sock go missing in the dryer, right? We don't know what happened to it, but suddenly we only have one sock. We used to have two, now there's one. So, Magnolia pins up these socks on the board, and it's a thing that she's kind of proud of. It's her prized possession in the laundromat until one day this customer comes in who's really angry. Something happens with an article of clothing in the laundromat, and the customer comes in and yells at Magnolia's mom in front of her and embarrasses Magnolia's mother and Magnolia in front of her and makes a comment about the sock board, about how dingy and tacky it is, etc. And so Magnolia takes it and puts it outside to throw it in the trash. She's embarrassed by it. She's upset. And that's when a new girl to the neighborhood, whose mom has bought a business down the street and who Magnolia has been introduced to, brings it back in and says, we need to find the matches to these socks. Rather than throwing it away, we need to figure out who their owners are. And because the laundromat really only serves a little neighborhood within New York City, they're able to use clues from the socks themselves to figure out who might be the owners within the city. And they become sock detectives and they go across the city in their little neighborhood and try to rematch these socks. All of that is so fun and so, so sweet. But the thing I love about this book is that on its surface, it's about these two kids who become sock detectives and traipse across New York City. But really, it's got so many layers, and it's about what it means to be a friend. It's about not judging people based solely on what they look like. It's about recognizing that people are like onions. We got layers to us, and sometimes the layers underneath are even more important than the ones on top. It's about what it's like to be the kid of parents who leave their homes and go across the world to create a better life for you. There's all of these nuances to this sweet, sweet book while we take this little sock adventure with these two girls, Iris and Magnolia. And the last thing I'll just say about it is it's also illustrated. So you have these cute little black and white illustrations throughout that were done by the author that I think are so, so fun and that I think will make this book even more accessible for readers. So it's Magnolia Woo Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller, and I think you should read it right now.
Amazing. Kind of, I'm gonna call that unexpectedly amazing. Just the really cool and unexpected theme, but yet I'm drawn in and just wanting to see how that adventure unfolds. So as you were sharing about it, I couldn't help myself. I was obsessing about people who would be friends with the characters in the book you're talking about,
Yeah.
just because that was kind of how you introduced it. What was that book? We both read it and loved it a lot. It had the radio tower town and the llama farm.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Simon Sort of Says by Aaron
Yes,
Bell.
okay.
Yes.
Among many other characters, I was picturing characters from that book maybe being really great friends
Yes.
with the ones that you just book
For
talked.
sure. These kids who maybe, for whatever reason, their life's a little different from the mainstream and they
Hmm.
feel that deeply, like they're not like other kids. And then learning that really we're all a lot more alike than we think. Our
Yeah.
circumstances may be different, but our hearts are connected in more ways than we might initially know.
And who was the author of the one that you just book talked again?
Chanel Miller, who, by
Okay.
the way, Brad, can I say something about that
Yeah.
really quick?
Yeah.
A lot of people might know Chanel Miller because she wrote a really like famous blockbuster memoir in 2019 called Know My Name, which was about a dark and traumatic experience that she had. That's not a book for kids, it's an adult book, but it was like a New York Times bestseller for many, many weeks and it won lots and lots of awards. And that book is really separate. This is her first book for kids. And I just feel like she knocked it out of the
Mm.
park. And I'm really excited because on August 6th, she is going to be joining me and everybody else for the Bookalicious Middle Grade Book Club, where we're going to talk about Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All. It's a big deal because Chanel Miller is kind of like an A-lister. It's real exciting and it's free. So anybody can join. I'll put the link in the show notes for this show, but I hope people will join us because I love this book so much.
This is why I sometimes lovingly call you the librarian to the stars. I don't know how you make these connections, but you're so gracious in sharing them with us. So will you please tag me on the tweet to sign up from that? And those are
Well,
free. Those are free opportunities, are they not?
they are. And can I say one more thing about them? Because I love them so much. Is that every month we explore or share a middle grade book. The author always joins us, but I also always make activities and curricula guides to go along with the books, and people who participate get those for free.
Hmm.
So you, as an educator, you get to hang out with the author, you get to read a great book, and you get materials that you could use with kids to help connect them to this book and connect them to the story. So, and it's all free. Free.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in life that I just never really knew how powerful it was before I had the chance to do it more is connecting in spaces with authors similar to what you're kind of inviting us into. It like going back to school always and having connections with kids or staff and not necessarily name dropping, but in a meaningful way being able to say,
Yeah.
yeah, I had lunch, or I was just on a Zoom with that author, and here's the tidbit they gave about the book that no one else knows about. It is like the coolest thing. So,
I know. It really is. I was a teacher and a librarian back before people were Zooming with authors a lot. Like that wasn't as popular as it is now. I wasn't a teacher before the internet. I'm not quite that old, but I was a librarian before people were really Zooming with authors. But I still had face-to-face author visits in my library. And kids would, even after the fact, pull a book by that author and say things like, not only, oh, this author came to our school, whatever, but they'll all say, this Miss LaGarde is friends with this author. And it like gives you street cred. Even
mm,
though I may not have been BFFs with that author, I just invited him to our school. The kids thought so, and that's all that matters.
mm. That's so cool. The last thing, Jen, and you always have this effect on me. You get me so excited about different things. But the other thing with the character connection,
Yeah.
I've thought about that before too, but somehow you upped it a level. Now you have me thinking almost like the Marvel universe, and I forget which one, if it was Infinity Wars, but whatever Marvel movie it was where it was like hundreds of the heroes.
Yeah.
Picture a book, somehow this monster collaborative book where you've got Kwame Alexander, Allison Gerber,
Yes.
Kate DiCamillo, Dan Gemeinhart, Angie Thomas, the list would go on and on and on. I shouldn't have started, but somehow if there was a way where all of their characters shared space somehow, like it's
Yeah.
got to be possible. And tell me that wouldn't be the coolest thing
It would
ever.
be the coolest thing ever. And as you're talking, here's what I'm thinking about. Wouldn't it be a really cool thing to, with kids, talking to them about a superhero universe and how superheroes tend to have their squad and, like they're the people who, well, now, wouldn't it be cool for kids to create that universe with book characters that they think would go together. So they could use any books they wanted and be like, yeah, Coyote Sunrise should totally be hanging out with like. And here, Coyote would have these superpowers, but this person would have this other superpower. Like they could use they could create their own universes, which I think would be awesome. So powerful. And they would see things in those characters that we would miss, and vice versa.
Love it. My goodness. All right. Well, these are not all day Zooms, people, so don't worry. It just is maybe starting to feel like that, but that's what Jenn does to me. Thank you for hanging out with us. And if you are
Yes.
interested in seeing any of the other books that we've talked about this year or over the past several years, you can go to Jenn. Can I kick it to you this time?
Sure. Readthisnow.net, where we have this week's recording, but also all of our previous recordings.
Amazing.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Until then, happy reading.